Alright guys, today we're going to delve into the incredibly gruesome story of Clarence Heatley, aka Preacher, aka the Black Hand of Death. Now Clarence Heatley was born sometime in 1953 in Harlem, New York. Now young Clarence wasted no time in getting busy down in these New York streets. At the age of 9, he was already serving time in juvenile detention centers. Basically from that point on, he became a career criminal before he even had double digits in his age. Not only was he a violent individual, he was quite the imposing figure who stood at a quite intimidating 6'7". Now him being so big and so willing to inflict violence at such a young age, any sort of empathy or sympathy left him a long time ago. Now through his 20s, Clarence really wasn't a fact. He was just another criminal. But around the 80s and 90s, when he was in his 30s, that's when he became a real formidable force in the streets of Harlem. He then created his own crew, the Preacher Crew. They were the most vicious, brutal cast of characters in Harlem at the time. There was no bridge too far when it came to accomplishing their goals. Men, women, and even children were targets for Clarence Preacher Heatley and his crew to exact violence upon. Now the Preacher Crew, they dealt in everything: drug trafficking, murder, kidnapping, extortion, robbery, racketeering, and torture. Yes, even torture. But their claim to fame really came from the kidnapping, extortion, and murder. They were ruthless, heartless, some of the most brutal individuals New York seen at that point. Now Preacher's crew comprised of some other individuals, obviously. We have John Cuff, who was a former NYPD housing police officer. That was basically Preacher's top enforcer. And for a man of that caliber, that can inflict that much violence, to trust you as his top enforcer means you must be getting busy when it comes to that line of work. Next on the list, we have Yvonne Miller, his live-in partner, who was also a key figure inside this gang and organization. Anthony Boatwright, a military veteran, so you know this guy knew what to do with a gun. His son Shaka, yes, his own son Shaka, was a part of the organization and a key figure. His daughter was also a part of the organization, but her name has not been revealed in court documents. We also have John Apple Porter, who was linked to another famous drug figure of that time, Rich Porter, and his name will be very important later on. We also have the cleanup crew. The guys, after a big mess was made, if you know what I mean, came in and cleaned everything up. Now let's talk about their most notable crimes that they've committed. This first story is alleged, but a lot of street figures from that time period all think it's true. This was the kidnapping of Bobby Brown, Whitney Houston's ex-husband. At the top of his fame, was kidnapped by the Preacher Crew because of a drug debt, and he was held for ransom, which, according to the stories, Whitney Houston came and paid the debt personally. That really exemplified the audaciousness of the Preacher Crew. They really had no bounds. There was not a line that they were not willing to cross. Celebrities at the top of the world were fair game. This next crime was so foul on so many levels. It really questions humanity and how can certain people go this far. We are of course talking about the kidnapping and eventual murder of Donnell Porter, the younger brother to Rich Porter, who was a very well-known and well-loved figure in the Harlem community during that time. On December 4th, 1989, they kidnapped 12-year-old Donnell Porter. It's one thing to target a child that's in junior high, but for his uncle, Johnny Apple Porter, to be the one to orchestrate it just for a couple bucks is where this story really becomes surprising and appalling all around. After kidnapping this child, they demanded a $500,000 ransom. After his older brother, Rich Porter, who was another notable drug figure in Harlem at the time, said, "Look man, I don't have $500,000 to give you." They said, "Okay, we'll make it $350,000. And unfortunately, the story gets darker, because on December 6th, the family was instructed to retrieve a package in the men's bathroom at the McDonald's on West 125th Street and Broadway. Obviously, the family, wanting to get this child back, followed directions, and what they found inside that bathroom was nothing short of chilling and unnerving. It was Donnell Porter's right index finger, 2 rings, and a 1-minute audio of him screaming and pleading for help, where you can hear young Donnell screaming, "Please get the money. They cut my finger off. Help me, please." Now, his brother, being a street figure, was trying to not get the police involved, trying to handle it himself and get the money. And after much convincing, Rich's family was able to convince him into getting the police involved. A couple days passed, no ransom was paid, and on December 10th, the family was delivered a note that said, "We still want the money. The child is in pain and he needs medical attention." This goes without saying, but these were some cold-hearted, gruesome figures. Now, Rich is obviously desperate to get his brother back as safely as possible. So he basically asked his supplier, Richard Fritz Simmons, another notable Harlem figure, for fronted cocaine, about 30 kilos, to try and raise the money. But unfortunately, it was too late. By the time all this is happening, the child was most likely dead for days at this point. On January 28, 1990, so we're talking well over a month after the initial kidnapping happened, his remains were found by a homeless man collecting cans on a bicycle path near the Hutchinson River Parkway in the Bronx. He was wrapped inside of 14 garbage bags with severe mutilation and torture, and his body, unfortunately, was found less than a mile away from his older brother, who was killed a couple weeks prior to that. I can't imagine what the family was and is still probably going through with all this happening in such a short time span. But as all these stories go, they were eventually caught and had to go through the justice system. On August 12th, 1996, the NYPD finally arrested him and got him off the street, ready to stand for trial. He, alongside 17 other members of his crew, were indicted. They were linked to, at the very least, 11 murders, but on the higher end, estimated 47. With a lot of people that were around during that time in the criminal underworld say 47 wasn't even it. They were raining hell and terror throughout the Bronx and Harlem sections of New York City, and it was finally coming to an end. After facing what is a very rare death penalty case in New York City, he decided to take a plea deal and come clean with a lot of his crimes. On February 5th, 1999, he pled guilty, and in March, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole plus 225 years. He is still alive, serving his time until he dies. That's the end of that story. There's a lot more you can get into if you really want to do a deep dive into some research about it and that organization. I just wanted to make a quick video on this organization because it's not really talked about, and they were as gruesome and as brutal as any crew that you could think of that was around in New York City.